Copyright disclaimer. Under Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. Okay, guys. So today I'm going to cover death of Susan Meister, 23. And Susan died aboard the ship Apollo, June 25th, 1971, with a bullet in the middle of her forehead. And this comes from Xenu.net. Chapter 18 of Barefaced Messiah by Russell Miller. At around this time, another young woman began causing problems for the Commodore. Susan Meister, a 23-year-old from Colorado, had joined the crew of the Apollo in February 1971, having been introduced to Scientology by friends while she was working in San Francisco. When she arrived on the ship, she was a typically eager and optimistic convert and wrote home frequently, urging her family to get into Scientology. Letters of Susan Meister to her family. Dear family, I just had a session, an auditing session. I feel great, and my life is expanding, and it's all hurry up, hurry, Scientology. Be a friend to yourselves, get into the stuff now. It's more precious than gold. It's the best thing that's ever come along. Love, Susan. Chapter 4 of A Piece of Blue Sky by John Atack. She once more urged her mother to read Hubbard's books and take Scientology courses. 10 days later, after writing the letter, Susan was dead. According to her father, Susan was lying on a bunk, wearing the new dress her mother had made for her, her arms crossed with a long-barreled revolver on her breast. A bullet hole was in the center of her forehead, and blood was running out of the corners of her mouth. I began to wonder how Susan could possibly shoot herself in the center of her forehead. I was wondering that myself. With a long-barreled revolver. She would have had to hold it with both hands at arm's length, and you got to be really strong. There were no powder burns on her forehead, which certainly would have been the case if the gun was against her forehead, as it would have been to shoot herself as the photograph appeared. Los Angeles Times, August 29, 1978. In mid-July that year, according to State Department correspondence obtained by the Times, Miss Meister's father traveled from Colorado to the Moroccan port of Safi, 125 miles south of Casablanca, where the Apollo was then moored, to inquire into his daughter's death. Meister is said to have questioned the explanation of the death proffered by the ship's officers. We got to keep note of who was on the Apollo in 1971. Apparently it wasn't all, what do they call that, rainbows and sunshine? Letter from Assistant Secretary of, He questioned the explanation of the death proffered by the ship's officers and indicated that he might seek an investigation of the Apollo. In turn, according to a November 11, 1971 letter from Assistant Secretary of State David M. Abshire to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, the Apollo's port captain threatened in the presence of the American vice consul from Casablanca, William J. Galbraith, that he had enough material, including compromising photographs, of Miss Meister to smear Mr. Meister first. See how great they are? I'd love to know who the name of that sucker was. 1971, huh? Keep that in mind, you guys. Affidavit of Hannah Whitfield, 8th March 1994. 187. Susan was on board about 6 months. She was PTS. Her family was upset because the ship's location was confidential and they did not know where she was. 188. In mid-1971, in my office on A deck, I heard a strange, sharp sound. It was traced to the aft bridge cabins where the senior ship's officers berthed. Keep note of that. And specifically to that of Chief Officer Amos Jessup. Susan was found shot, because someone else did it, lying on the bunk in Amos's cabin. I helped Mary Sue Hubbard, who was in charge of the GO, the Guardian's Office, which is now OSA, which apparently, I guess Mike Rinder wrote the policies, the OSA policies, I don't know, to investigate the death. Mary Sue checked the aft bridge cabin where Susan died, so they say. I checked Susan's bunk below decks and her possessions, but found nothing amiss. Mary Sue had already removed Susan's letters, notebooks, and other personal effects. Yeah, I wonder why she'd do that. You guys wonder? I arranged for someone to send Susan's clothes to her family. We interviewed Amos Jessup, who was visibly upset and shaking on and off. He blamed himself as Susan wanted a committed relationship and he didn't. Susan was in the cabin alone after he went to work, so they say. He didn't see her alive again. He had no idea she was suicidal. 189. We interviewed a deckhand who was working on a deck port side aft of the bridge cabin when the shot occurred. He reported the sound and located Amos. We interviewed Susan's superior. The ship's medical officer. Yeah, you know, the medical officers that are not really medical. And several other people. They all said Susan was emotionally unstable. Mary Sue wrote a report for the Moroccan police. I guess Mary Sue needed to save them some time, huh? And nobody knows anything. She probably had a journal. Mary Sue Hubbard made sure she took care of that. Maybe she was distraught because they wouldn't let her off the ship? You think? Yeah, maybe she was upset about this guy not wanting to be with her, supposedly. We don't know. But there's just way too much funny stuff going here. And there's a picture of her father. This is a picture of my daughter, and that's all I have. Susan's father testified about the death of his daughter and subsequent harassment and death threats he received. Yeah, that's a fair gaming. That apparently is not illegal to FBI or Home Security or anyone. The transcripts of those City of Clearwater Commission hearings held in 1982 are available here. Oh, that'd be interesting. Also on the web are the preliminary and final report of the Clearwater Commission. Here's a collection of newspaper articles covering the hearings. This is, amongst other things, what Susan's father had to say. My name is George Meister. I'm here not because I've ever been a member of the Church of Scientology or ever will be, but I'm here on behalf of my daughter, Susan, and I'd like to have the camera get a shot of this picture, possibly. This is the picture of my daughter, and that's all I have. Susan died aboard the ship Apollo, June 25th, 1971, with a bullet in the middle of her forehead. You don't even have to be a police officer, a detective, or an expert to know that right there sounds funny. That's because somebody shot her at probably fairly close range, but you can't really get a bullet like that in your head by yourself. I'm not going to go into the gory details. View in real video the moving testimony of George Meister on www.xenotv.com. Read also Scientology's disgusting attempt to get Jack Galbraith, vice counsel from the American Council in Casablanca, who helped Susan's father in trouble, from the files of the FBI, 246, 247, 248, 249, and 250. Yeah, and there we go. FBI was involved. They know what's going on. Susan wanted to go home but was denied the request to leave. See? Oh, wow, did I call that? Did I call that? She wanted to leave. The following is Ken Urquhart in 2001 giving his comments on the critical book A Piece of Blue Sky by John Atak. It's a good book, by the way. Urquhart was closely working with Hubbard, and even now he still sees L. Ron Hubbard as some kind of Superman. Keep that in mind reading the rest of his story. Oh, the pain. I was involved unknowingly in Susan Meister's situation. A week or so before her death, she had written to LRH asking his permission for her to leave the ship and return home. At that time, his policy on such was to refuse. It varied. I composed a reply to this effect and included it in his mail for signature. He signed it. He was considerably put out when I reminded him of this. He had signed the reply without reading it or its original request, and this was not unusual practice for him. What a great guy. I should have known better. From then on, I put a warning note on any similar reply composed for him to sign. I will always deeply regret that her cry came through me, and I chose to adhere to the current policy rather than to hear her, listen to her, and help her in compassion and good sense. Yeah, apparently good sense is hard to find around there. Okay. And there's her obituary. My personal opinion, I think it's a complete cover-up. We never got the real story on her. Excuse me. And hopefully, somehow she can get some kind of justice. Have a good day, everyone. Peace.